Okay, gang, I'm going to go ahead and rush you through the UV process, and then if I have some time, probably another video, I'll show you how to kind of bring all this, do the high-res, low-res stuff, and go through Substance Painter, and then into Unreal. So the first step is UVs. So I want you to go ahead and first off, go to Windows, Workspace, make sure you're under UV Editing. Okay, so you get this UV editor on the side, and you got this window here. So I'm going to go ahead and say Create Polygon Cube. Now, by default, the Polygon Cube has the 0 to 1 space. This is where everything you want to squeeze everything in. So you can see these blue lines, and this first little square is where you want to shove everything into. So here is the actual, they went ahead and laid out the UVs for you. UVs, if you're not familiar, are the unfolded, unboxed version, unfolded out box of what it is that you're actually making in 3D. You have to unfold it. There has to be seams. There's nothing you could do about that. So you can see the seams are signified by these white lines. And you can kind of look as we kind of show the kind of shape here. I could come in here, right-click edge, grab an edge. You can see that one edge corresponds to one edge here. I can go ahead and say cut, and now I have a seam here. And if I right-click, hold, and grab UV shells, I can actually take these shells. I'll hit the W key for translate. And now I have two different UV shells. And again, I'm right-clicking, clicking UV shells, and there's two UV shells. Okay, so now if I grab this edge, you'll see two edges correlate with one edge in 3D space. These squares should correlate, at least the layout, what you see here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show you if you click on this little button here. This allows you to see the distortion. So in other words, if I right-click and grab a UV, which is a UV, it's like a green color here. As I pull this over, you can see the color starts changing to like red. It's just getting nastier and nastier here. And this basically, blue would mean technically kind of overlap. But the UVs are not matching up with what's going on in the real world here. So you can see this tells me that this area is in trouble. Okay, whereas these areas back here are okay. Okay, so you can use that tool. I don't like to have that. I'll go ahead and turn it off. Before I start laying out any UVs, what I like to do is to get this, get a material assigned to this. So I'm going to go ahead and do Windows Rendering Editor Hypershade. And I'm going to go ahead and say Create Material, and I will choose a Lambert. Here it is. And I'm going to go ahead and double click this, and I'm going to click on this little checkerboard for color, and I'm going to choose File. And I'm going to go ahead and plug in a texture that I found online. Okay, UV map reference. If you go online and just Google type in UV texture, you'll find at least a 2K or 4K texture of this weird pattern. It doesn't have to be like this, but it's basically letters and numbers. Okay, so now I can go ahead over here to shading and turn on hardware texturing. And I should see, if I grab this mesh and right-click on my Lambert 2 and say Assign Material to Selection, I can see this set up. Now, I like to have this texture be 4K, because if you're going into VR, it's good to see, you don't want to see a down-res version of something, but you can see how close you as a viewer will be able to get to this object without it starting to lose resolution. Now, this image I currently have is a 2K image. It should be a 4K image because I want to see how close can I get before I start seeing the pixels. Okay, because I'm going to probably put a 4K texture on this object. Most of the stuff that you guys are building and maybe substance painting, depending on how big the object is in 3D space, probably is going to require a 4K or a 2K texture. Okay, so now that we have this on here, you can see the actual information is being shown here, and I can kind of play around with this. So if I go ahead and grab these edges here, I want to show you what I can do. I can alternatively grab these edges. I just click one edge here, and I could say so. So is kind of crappy because it doesn't move the objects and just merges them at the half point. You want to do move and so. And move and so will actually move the smaller piece over to the bigger piece, and the bigger piece will stay put, the smaller piece will attach. So you can see there's many different ways to skin a cat. I could take this edge here, and I can cut it, and then I can come over here, and I could choose this edge here, and the move and sew will actually rotate this 90 degrees and attach it here. So I'll go ahead and come over here and say move and sew. So you can see that did it really nice. Or I could have just right-clicked UV shell, take this, move it, rotate it around like that. Not a good idea to do. There are tools. If you go to UV Toolkit here, you can kind of see If I go ahead and right click, there's the edges. So if I want to rotate this without, being pretty good at rotation, I can take this UV shell, come over here to transform, and I can actually rotate it by clicking under tools, rotate, and rotate counterclockwise 90 degrees. And now you can see the edges line up. So I can go ahead and say move and sew. A lot of move and sew fun that we can do. Okay, so there's like cutting and moving and sewing. It's about as far as I do. I don't like doing sewing. It's kind of stupid, actually. So anyway, how would you UV something a little bit more complicated than a just simple cube? Well, I'm going to go ahead and grab this edge here, or this face, and I'm going to say mesh, extrude, edit mesh, extrude, pull it out, and grab this face and hit the G key to repeat the command, and go ahead and extrude that out. So basically just extrude out, make it kind of a stair step. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to be able to have a concave edge, and then of course these are all convex edges. They kind of come out, so I want to make sure I see that. I'm not making this super complicated, by the way. You can see the UVs are a mess up here. We're getting banding, repeating the same pixel. Obviously what's going on here, if we take a look at their UVs, and I just double click on transform, you can see UVs are on top of themselves. They're a mess. Yuck, what do? Well, I'm going to show you the easiest way to lay out UVs. Just grab the mesh, come over here to UVs. Okay, you have to be under the modeling tab, by the way. And you're going to go UVs, and you go to planar option box. And I usually set this to camera. Could do X, Y, and Z. I find this to be the best results. I'll hit apply, and all it does is it projects like a movie projector where I was looking. Okay, and whoop-de-doo, it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want, move this around. The key to understand is why I do this is that I want all of the actual edges to be merged together. There are no seams on this UV layout, okay, which is something you can't have because you have to unbox this or unravel it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab some edges here, just like how you would kind of figure out how to cut open a box so it lays flat. I'll just come over here and say cut. And let's see what else here. I guess I could go ahead and grab this, and say cut. And okay, so I made a couple of cut edges. And let's see what that gives us. So I'm going to go ahead, and you'll notice when we did the UV layout, it automatically assigned a material to it, which is this checkerboard, which is annoying. We'll take care of that in a minute and get back our old material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click UV shells. I'm going to grab the UV shells, and you could move these independently, by the way. So I can go ahead and looks like it's still one piece. So if I take this, hold down Shift, right mouse button hold, move my mouse to the left, unfold, and then unfold. And it looks like crap, right? It's like, ugh, what's going on here? Well, it probably means that I need to make a couple more divisions here. Okay, so again, the white lines signify an actual seam. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut these guys. So it doesn't matter if this looks like crap. You don't have to undo it or nothing. And I'll just go ahead and say cut. Let's try that out. So you just keep taking this thing, right-click, UV seam. You can see now there's two pieces here. And I'll grab both of them, hold down Shift, right mouse button, unfold, unfold. And we're getting there. We got this piece here, and we got this piece here. So I like to look at things in a form of strips. So I'll take this little, take this here, say cut, and then I'll take this UV shell, hold down Shift, right mouse button, unfold, unfold. There we go. Now what's really cool is you can grab all this geometry. You can hold down Shift, right mouse button, and drag this down to Orient Shells. It's going to orientate it the best of its ability for viewing purposes. Now I'm not sold yet because this actually looks inverted, this face, this here. And the way we can test that is by bringing back our geometry here. So I'm going to go to Hypershade here. I'm going to grab that material again, click here, make sure I'm in object mode. Click here, right click, assign that Lambert, and take a look. The whole purpose of having the actual, labels here is that I can rotate this around and blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to right click, grab this UV shell, and I like to use my rotate 90-degree tool, and I'll rotate this until it's facing towards me, as you can see. I'm going to take this piece and let's look at it. It's looking pretty good. If I, kind of move around, the letters are not upside down. If I need to, I can go ahead, if the letters are reverse or backwards, I can come over here and take this and flip it. So let's see if I can figure out. I forgot how to do it. Let's see. There's rotate. I don't know. There should be a flip. I don't know where it went. There it is. Flip UVs. So I'm going to flip it, reversing. This is bad. You don't want this. Why is that? Well, because if you're in Photoshop and you want to texture this, you'll have to write letters backwards. Okay. Not a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and flip it back. You want the, everything facing correctly, looking good. You can see the scale difference is a little bit different here. These circles, if I go ahead and just look at the UV shells here, the scale is different. So this scale is different than this scale. See that? So we don't want that. We want all these squares to be relative to each other the same size. Because if I zoom up here, you'll see this looks blurrier than this. And that's not going to be good when we do some texturing, especially when you're wanting to look at this in virtual reality. Now this long strip, it might be more optimal actually to make a division here. So I'll go ahead and say cut. So now I have a nice UV shell. So I'm going to do the layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these pieces, right click UV shell, lasso grab it, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come over here and hold down Shift, right mouse button, layout option box UVs. And a couple things you're going to do. You're going to turn off pre-rotation. What's going to do is it's going to try to shove all these pieces in this 0 to 1 space. And if you have pre-rotation on, horizontal, vertical, it'll actually rotate these pieces. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep them not rotating. But what I definitely want to do is under Shell Prescale, I want to set this to preserve 3D ratios so that they actually are similar UV layouts to each other. The texture map size, this doesn't really matter, but it tells you how close these things can get to the edge. Higher number will get this closer to the edge because you have higher resolution. I leave it at 1024. I put a shell padding of 9, which will keep these pieces basically 9 pixels away from each other. And then the tile padding of 9 pixels will keep it away from this edge. Padding is essential, especially when using Substance Painter, of at least, say, 10 pixels, because that's going to play a big part. Now, if you're going to do 10 pixels, as far as it's important to kind of say, well, I'm probably going to be creating a 4096 map. Okay, because that's how it's going to define the space here. So, no biggie. Okay, so off, preserve 3D ratio, 1010, texture size 4096. Let's go ahead and apply. So you can see it did a really nice job of shoving all this crap in these corners. There is some space in between here, very important. And then there's space away from the edge, which is nice. That's probably enough spacing. You can go even crazier if you wish. But this is a nice layout. All the squares are perfectly, they all are the same size to each other. If I zoom around the edge here, this is bothering me a little bit. I probably want to come in here and rotate this 9 degrees. If you want to change this to 45 degree every time you click this button, you can. Sometimes the layout will do 45. Make sure there are no UVs overlapping each other. Big time mistake if you do that. Make sure there are no UVs on the outside of the 0 to 1 space. Take some time to make sure nothing goofy is going on here. So a good way to finish off a model is to do some diagnostics. I'm going to do a little illegal stuff here. I'm going to take this UV here. I'm going to go ahead and overlap it on here. And then I'll take this UV here and have it outside the 0 to 1 space. Okay. Now what you can do is you can right click, grab the shells, and here's a cool tool. If you go over here to select, you can say overlapping UVs. And this tells you these two shells are overlapping. So that'll give you a warning sign that you screwed up. And of course you can come in here and mess with this. There's a nice little tool I like to use. Is I'll right click and say UVs, and I'll grab this UV and we'll click here. And I'll grab this UV here. And I'm actually going to use these align and snap tools. These guys I love. What this means is it's going to take the point that's the furthest down in the vertical, and it's going to take this point and move it down until it comes to, in this case, right here, this line. So that's what this means here. It's saying take this here and bring it down. So watch. Boom. See what it did? Now I still have this kind of nasty diagonal line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this point and grab this point, and I'm going to align it this way. So it's going to take the furthest left point and make that sort of like the limbo bar and say you can't go any further. So I'm going to align it that way. So now you can see it's lined up beautifully. Sometimes that mistake happens. Same thing here. I'll grab these 2 points and I will move this like that. And you can see even this one's a little jagged. You don't want to have jaggy edges. So I'm going to go ahead and take that, move it down. So nice, and it's looking pretty good. You can also take a whole series of points like this and bring them down. And yeah, you want to look for jaggy. So, okay, there we go. So this is a nice piece of geometry ready to go. For this, you can go Modify, Freeze Transformations, Edit, Delete by Type History. Okay, and now you have a piece of geometry, and then you can do Modify, Center Pivot. So now the pivot's into center. It's looking nice and pretty. If you take a look at the geometry here, it's zeroed out. Take a look at the cube here. All this information is zeroed out. So if I move it over here, I can come over here and type in the rotates and hit 0. It'll pop back. Oops, what happened there? There we go. So we're back. Very easy to do with boxes. Let's talk about something a little bit more organic. So I'm going to take this cube and say Display, Hide Selection. Some of you guys are making spoons, making forks, all types of fun. So I'll go ahead and create, let's create a Polygon Sphere. So when you're dealing with this sort of geometry, you want to think of the best solution as far as planar, or think of strips, right? So in the same way how a fruit roll-up, right? You want to unroll that fruit roll-up. Or you want to project something down like a pancake with the least amount of distortion possible. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to take this geometry and just merge all these UV edges by coming in here and saying planar. Now if I go to the option box, it's set the camera so I don't have to keep doing this. And there we go, right? And then you just have your fun of cutting pieces out. So I'm going to click here and double click the second line to make the loop go all the way around. I'll come down here, click and double click. The way I look at it is from below, the distortion as far as flatness would occur makes sense about right there. Okay, I probably wouldn't get any further because it's starting to go parallel to camera. Now this is going to be a strip all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here and just hold down Shift and click all these edges. And this will be one big strip fruit roll up unrolled from left to right. So I'm going to go ahead and say Cut UVs. And you can see I got that circle here, here, here. So all I got to do, right click, UV shells, right click, unfold, unfold. Ta-da! Now this looks very weird looking, right? This is the most relaxed UV layout for this. How do I know that? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. I'll go ahead and right click this, say Assign Existing Material. I have my Lambert 2. Let's take a look. Looking pretty good, right? Let's go ahead and grab our UV shells. Hold down Shift, right mouse button, and go to Orient Shells. So it's done its best. Got a little confused there. I might just manually rotate this, or what I like to do is go to my UV shell, go to my rotate, and I'll rotate this 90 degrees until something is facing straight up. There we go. It's looking pretty nice. So, not the greatest. You know, if I come around to the edge here, there's the seam. Things don't fold together, but you know what? Guess what? Organic stuff is like this. The least amount of distortion. I couldn't align these perfectly straight up and down, but I'm going to get some distortion. You can come in here, right-click, hold, do an optimize. Optimize does a nice kind of unfolding action. The other thing you could do is come in here and do straighten UVs. Now there's an option box for this. And you can see how intense of a degree you want this. So I can hit apply, and it's going to do its best, but you're going to get some crunchy edges right here. Okay. So I'm going to undo that. And this is probably good enough for what I'm dealing with. I could also take the intensity of this angle down maybe like 5. And apply. It's starting to get things a little bit organized. You know, I could even go something as crazy as 20. There we go. And yeah, you kind of look at that and go, okay, look, there's rectangles now. I want these to be squares. Well, then you could take this UV shell if you want and scale it up a little bit so that it stretches out. There you go. So you might have to come in here and use that alignment tool and align these up. So for instance, I could go to UVs, grab these guys, and align right, and I can grab these guys like that, align right. You can see how messy this can get. Align right. Get these guys. Align right. Align right. This is me kind of, whoops, make sure I got that, there we go. And align right. Oy, oy, oy. So anyway, you're kind of getting the gist of this, where you can come in and fix this. Now, this is not going to be perfect because you can see the distortion is going to get weird here. The best rested position for this, again, is grabbing the UV shell, holding shift, right click, unfold, unfold. There are some options in the unfold, by the way. You have a couple iterations in here. You could do 2 and hit apply. You can see it's not doing much. There's also some legacy options here. It does a terrible job of unfolding. This unfold 3D is unbelievable. Go ahead and hit edit reset settings if you want and come back to this. You can see it says something like prevent self-border intersection, prevent triangle flips. There's not much else you can do in here. Fix non-manifold, that's all right. Let's go ahead and do this. That's the most rested position. So I'm going to grab these pieces, right click, layout UV option box, off, preserve 3D, hit apply. So now you can see this is a decent compromise. It's not the greatest. You know, I prefer probably to get this a little bit more squarish going on, you know, but it does help big time. And maybe I'll take this and rotate it so that this maybe like something like that. You know, there's a lot of stuff you can do in here. There's other tools I won't get into, but you can see how everything feels pretty decent. Okay. So last but not least, let's go ahead and just play around with the triangle. So, or sorry, not triangle. Polygon Cylinder. Let's go for that. What's this all about? Well, you can see the UVs are already laid out nicely for you. We're not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and grab the mesh and destroy the work that Maya did for us. And go to UVs and do planar. There we go. There's no seams. Obviously, it'd probably be a good idea to click and double click, get these seams in here. So I'm going to cut it. It's just like how you would cut a box so that it would unfold perfectly. And then I'll take this and say cut. And we are good to go. This one's a little bit easier, obviously. And now I just grab it, grab the UV shells, shift right click, unfold, unfold, shift right click, Orient Shells, shift right click, layout UV option box, apply, done. Okay. This is a lot of wasted UV space in video game industry. They'd fire you. You would, if you had like gun turrets or something, like if this was some sort of spaceship, you'd want to put more junk here and fill up as much space as you possibly can. Okay, big time, especially in video games. Resolution's like gold from the mountains of, you know, the Rockies. I mean, it's like you want it, and you can only get it by getting as much junk squeezed in here as possible. So in this case, this is about as far as we can go. There's really no way to kind of make this any more optimized than it is. Some people would cheat and say, well, you know, hey, and we used to do this in video games a lot. Scale this up, move it over here. But then again, you're getting a difference in resolution between these two here. When it comes to normal maps, when it comes to bump maps or height maps, when it comes to resolution of color and texture, it's not a good idea. I'll just show you an exaggerated example here. I'll take this down like really horribly bad. And even more. If you take a look, let's find a couple edges here. You can see the blurriness of this line. In this case, it's checkerboard, so it's procedural. But if we were to assign that texture, right-click, assign existing texture, Lambert 2, you could see the difference in resolution. Blurry, not blurry. Okay. Having a normal map sort of kind of transition between these two pieces will be horrific for what you're doing. So that technically is UV layout. As you just try to look for the best planar type, if I was almost like, best way I could describe it, because you guys will be dealing with some weird shapes of stuff, right? Is to try to look at things in perspective of, like, for instance, see if I could do a torus really quick and try to help you guys out. I would look at this like looking from above, where does this distortion end? In this case, it ends right about here, right? So first, let me go ahead and do the old thing I showed you before. I'll come over here and do planar track, or planar, you know, there we go. And now, again, I'm going to come to the top and say, if I'm projecting from the top, where would the distortion not work? Well, right here where it's perpendicular to camera, but probably right about here. And then right about here. Okay, it would be a good idea. So I can go ahead and say cut UVs. Got those babies. And do the same thing here. G key is always a friendly tool. And then, of course, I'll go ahead and make a division all the way across here so that we cut it. Right-click UVs, grab it, shift, right-click, unfold, unfold. Right-click the Orient Shells. And there you go. And then again, hold down UV Shells, shift, right-click, layout, layout. Again, not the best optimized. And then you can see issues like this where you're like, maybe I want to have these straightened, right? Take this UV shell, shift, right-click, straighten UVs, option box, and put this to something like 10 or something. Hit apply. You can see how it's starting to apply. Let's try 15. Oops, need more. Let's try 20. Look at that. Ooh, that looks nice. Now, you may like that, but how far off is the distortion? I'll right-click, assign existing material Lambert 2, and you can see maybe those areas that were kind of expanded out were there for a purpose. If I grab those faces, you could see, you know, maybe there's a little bit of distortion going on, but not too bad. Not too bad at all. Okay. And again, just to be safe, you can go ahead, grab these UV shells, shift, right-click out, layout, layout, and that'll kind of move things into perspective. So you might decide that you don't want to have like 5 and 6 rotated 90 degrees to the right, so you can take this UV shell, right-click in the UV, grab UV shells in the 3D space, and you can come over here to rotate, and we could rotate it. So I'll go ahead and rotate it like that. This looks good from the top. That's looking good from the bottom. This inert looks okay. And again, right-click, UV shells, grab these guys, shift, right-click, unfold, unfold. Upside down unfold, what am I doing? Layout UVs. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Layout, layout. You'll notice if you take this piece of geometry and you go unfold, unfold, it's going to kind of push itself back to that form, and that's the most rested position. That's actually a correct reality. But, you know, we don't want that. We want to kind of stay put. Okay. And again, I come over here and do straighten. Let's go to straighten UVs. Boom. Does a nice job. If these things are a little bit out of whack, you're in trouble. And that's it, gang. That is UV layout. And you are ready to go to create your high-res mesh. Everything is beautiful. It's looking good. You are going to have seams. Tough love. Too bad. That's the way things work. But again, the reason why we try to put you try to connect as many of these pieces as possible is because you might want to paint these in Photoshop or something, or in the UV space inside of Substance Painter, where you want to paint letters across here. And you don't want to do it on here. You want to do it on this strip. It's a lot easier. But you'll find that if these are cut up into a million pieces, you're going to be like, I can't draw. I can't do that. You know. So having these UV shells at least amount the possible and the most combined possible. In this case, this is the compromise we have to kind of assess. So I hope that's good enough for you. Next lesson, I'll go over how to jump into Substance, how to make the low res, the high res, and bring it into Substance. And we'll do some very slight paint jobs. Again, you guys can look at my training video. But I'm going to kind of just run through this shotgun style. So this is technically part 1.